Wow, after a long time away, welcome back to Planet Product Owner. This is your host. This is Scott. Listen, my apologies for not getting the more periodic fashion that we're used to with the episodes coming out. Just on a personal note, I've had a couple of personal things going on here with some family members. We've had a death in the family pretty close to us, and so we've been working on that a lot for the past several weekends, and working through that, I should say, I guess. But now that we're back, I just want to welcome everybody back into Planet Product Owner, where we talk a little bit about the art, a little bit about the science, and try to wrap this thing up for product owners like you, like me, like whoever else might be listening. And I mean, we're getting, like I said, some Scrum Masters listening. We're getting some organizational leaders listening. We're getting some development team members listening in, and several product owners, and just people who really just have general curiosity of what it is that we do, on a daily basis in our role. So I think it's great to have that kind of engagement and that kind of audience so far. We're up to a lot more plays than I ever thought that we would have on this show. And I'm really happy, truth be told, I'm really happy that it's getting some traction, that we have some listeners out there. Now, again, I would caution you, if you're listening to the first episode, or if you know somebody who listened to the first episode and they were like, dude, this audio is really rough, give us another try. I'm hoping that that's improving. So let's jump into what we're going to talk about. I left off on the last episode about breaking down some of the disconnects, I guess, between the different languages that we speak in an Agile Scrum or a Lean delivery model and what we may find in a traditional model. And just reviewing that a little bit, we talked a little bit about, the need for transparency, work sessions, collaboration, things like that. The document on a different grade reading level than what we're accustomed to having in our day-to-day, like sprint or stand-up, or in our retros and things like that. And so just the choice of words and how the thing is kind of designed makes it really difficult for us to navigate sometimes as product owners. We did talk about maybe some of the distinctions in that it really prescribes to us or tells us what it is that the customer is asking for or what the business is asking for. But it's really difficult for us to find the why, and finding the why is really critical to us because we want to make sure we're solving the right problem. We're working on the right thing. Then we kind of finished up that episode talking about figuring out where's the fire, why we need it, why do we need it now, what has happened, what are some of the risks that are involved that we're trying to protect against or trying to solve or mitigate. And then I mentioned to you we want to find out how it's going to be measured. And so that's really what we're going to kind of talk about today, is touching on how it's going to be measured. But there are a couple things in here that I really kind of wanted to make sure that we're covering or covering again, I guess, from the last episode as it relates to finding out the why. And I hope that, and just kind of as a recap, I guess, we're talking about these one-on-one work sessions that I've been trying to encourage you to do, to set up with your sponsor or your primary SMEs or whoever it is that's kind of holding the keys and will be the kind of the overall approver, since they are probably the primary requester of whatever it is that you're trying to deliver. And so we talk a little bit about transparency, and I've shared with you before about being transparent but not giving away the farm. You've heard me say that a lot. So before we get into the measurement part, I just want to kind of recap on this and why it's so important to understand the why. And the why is and again, I kind of mentioned, before you get to the KPIs, before you get to the metrics and all of that stuff, just really asking the question, what was the driver for this? And getting to the bottom of this effort or this initiative or this solution or this feature or whatever it is that you're working on is so important. I think you're understanding now why the why is so important. And I've talked about that in our story writing techniques before, that the why is really important. We talked about how we convey to the team the goal that they're going to solve. They need to understand why they're delivering what they're delivering. So, because a lot of times the team's going to have a better idea on delivering that, as they should, than what is being, kind of directed down to you. right? So, but they're not going to know that until we explain the why. So you have to do that. So I think you're basically understanding now, tying the why back to the what that you found earlier. And you're not so much done once you do that, though. Here's the thing. What I find is that just taking their feedback on the why is sometimes just not enough, because it might not make sense, right? So we could just take the why and tie it to the what and expect it all to make sense, but a lot of times it doesn't, because what I found sometimes is what I found a lot of times is one of these things is not like the other. You have to go back, and probably not during this initial session that we talked about, or this kickoff, or whatever we're going to call it. This could span over more than one session, right? You got to go back and tie up what they defined and what you had them clarify and separate to see what's really relative to your effort. And this is where that sharp contrast perspective comes into play, because you're going to find that one of these things doesn't belong. You're going to have some kind of fluff, or you're going to have some kind of something in there it's going to cost us a lot more to build this or to do it this way, when really we're just trying to solve for something a whole lot more basic than that. I hope that's making sense to you. You probably got a project or an initiative or a theme or a feature or something in mind already where you're like, oh yeah, I kind of see what you're saying. And I'm not trying to make this specific to a specific situation, because you can probably apply this somewhere. Again, we talk a lot of generalities here because there's so many different organizational attributes, I guess, that impact what we do as product owners. So that sharp contrast perspective. So I know I've used this term before. I hope you understand that that's not just a term. It's really a critical part of problem solving and root cause analysis, by the way. When you apply the concept of determining what that sharp contrast is, you apply that to your findings, it's critical. If your findings are not supporting the understanding of that sharp contrast or the need, then you probably need to consider your approach or reconsider your approach. There's almost always going to be a need to compare and contrast. And out of that, we will find the sharp contrast that we're looking for, the thing that this does not belong here. And you're going to find that, and likely you will, right? So it means there's some other, okay, so it's like, okay, what does this mean, Scott? It means there's some other kind of agenda that we haven't touched on, all right? And I don't know that you want to show that card yet to your primary sponsor, stakeholder, whoever you're meeting with. That's the one you want to kind of hold on to, because you don't want that to come up. You don't want that to come up in the group meeting, all right? And the reason for that is because if you did find this sharp contrast out there, it's probably added in there by request. Think about, again, the author or the editor of this document that we're talking about that's being handed off. Somebody's added this little function or this little nugget in there for some reason, right? And somebody signed off on it. So you don't want to bring that up to the group if you just happen upon this sharp contrast. That's the one that you want to hold until you get your one-on-one or your share care time with that primary sponsor or that primary stakeholder. And you're going to have to build trust with them before you can really get them to share with you on what that one really meant. I really hope that you have one of these that you can draw on from experience to understand what I'm talking about. You will find something in that document that just seems like it doesn't belong. Like, why are we doing this? That's so far off of the path of the goal. But it made sense to somebody to put it in there. So that's the one you want to cover with that primary contact, though, right? So let it go for now. But if you come across it when you're in the meeting or when you're in that session, a work session, just put an exclamation point next to it or a star or something to make you remind you about it, so that you can get back in your one-on-one share care time to discuss that one, because there could be some kind of agenda there that needs to be pushed or needs to be obtained. Or there may be some agenda in there that from another editor or contributor to that document that primary stakeholder or primary sponsor needs to be aware of. Because remember, it's about transparency. It's not about giving away the farm all the time. And I say that because I don't want, we as a team, we succeed. We as a team, we learn. We learn or we win, right? I mean, there's no other way around it. But I'm not going to throw my team under the bus or a team member under the bus. So, if we fail to meet our sprint goal or whatever the case is, which that shouldn't happen, okay? But if it does, what I mean by not giving away the farm is I'm not going to say it's because we have a new junior programmer on our team who really doesn't know anything about our domain. That's not, that may be the case, but I'm not going to share that one, okay? It's because we're all on a different part of the journey and everybody's coaching and learning every day a little more and more, and we're getting better, right? So now that I've recapped that and kind of given that to you, and I hope that helps you with something that you might be going through right now, with some of these things that stick out like a sore thumb, and it's like, what the hell is that? I mean, I don't. Why are they asking for this thing? Just know there's probably an agenda behind that somewhere by someone who contributed to that document that your primary stakeholder or sponsor needs to be made aware of. It could be their agenda. You might want to help them win on that. It could be something that someone else added into that to protect some other part of the process or business or workflow that maybe your primary stakeholder sponsor disagrees with. But it's something that definitely you want to be transparent about, but just do it in the right forum. Okay, so stick around for the next segment, and we're going to jump into how we measure. And I think it's really important how we measure what we're doing, because that's the only way we know if we're hitting the mark, right? So I'm looking forward to spending this time back with you again and getting back on a regular cadence here on Planet Product Owner. Stick. I know you won't believe this, but I've been accused of enjoying just listening to myself talk. Okay, so anyway, we're back. Thanks again for sticking around. So we talked about that sticking out like a sore thumb thing and the importance of bringing that thing up, but in the right forum. So now let's jump back to the premise of this disconnect on traditional meets agile, right, or traditional meets lean. We're talking about measurement, so we need to find out how we're going to be measured, or how the solution is going to be measured, I guess, the impact. So I hope that by now, and you need to make this a goal, right? I mean, when you're getting this handoff, you found out what the real behavioral desires and outcomes are, right? You found that out. You found out why we have to do it now, or why we have to do it, at this pace, and maybe what's kept us from doing it before. We talked about that in the last episode. We may have even uncovered a little nugget behind that was just kind of left behind by somebody who has some other agenda with the full solution, or one that was just simply plugged in there by the person with the money, right? That's cool. So all that's good. The thing we need to know now, though, is how are we going to know that we're going to be successful in this? This is the measuring stick. Now, this is where the metrics and maybe the KPIs come into play for us. Remember, I told you in the last episode that we're talking about, what is it that we're really trying to solve for? What is the risk? What is the opportunity? Those kinds of questions. And I made mention of the KPIs, but not in that initial setting, right? Because a lot of times in that initial setting, again, remember, somebody has written this document up. They've drawn this thing up. They've edited it. They've authored it under some kind of direction. Sometimes we hope, maybe not. We just don't know. I mean, that's the thing. So somebody, somebody in that room probably already has a list of these kinds of metrics that this new solution must report. And I've seen it a lot. And from what I've seen, I can tell you, and I'm going to say this, most of them really don't matter. And I know that sounds not nice, but I'm just telling you like it is. I mean, I'm just being real with you, okay? And let me tell you why I say that. It's because they're just there because those numbers have been passed down generationally, like the urban legend told around the campfire, like the game of telephone we referenced. We need to make sure that we're identifying the top valid metrics. Maybe we need to put it like this. There's a couple of ways to measure whether or not we're successful. And I'd like to know what your definition of success is. Now, We talked in a previous episode about KPIs and metrics, the difference between the two, and how your organization should be publishing those and making them visible if it's a KPI, because that's something that they figured is definitely moving the needle, right? But when we come to the table with some of these solutions that are drawn up in these larger documents, my hope is that the organization has all that stuff in their back pocket and they're ready to present it, or it's already in this thing. It's usually somewhere in the front. This is our business case or whatever you have, right? The issue that I take with that in the larger setting, though, is that I'm not going to debate whether or not the KPIs or the metrics that they have listed there are valid or not. What I am going to do is I'm going to ask them to tell me in their own words. And that's why I'm doing this in this larger group setting. I'm not necessarily talking about the KPIs and metrics that are listed in there. What I want to hear from the group, though, is tell me in your own words what we're trying to, and here comes our directional verb, right? What are we trying to increase, decrease, reduce, expand, improve? And then I'm just going to kind of leave it at that, right? Because I don't want to get into the weeds about it, but I just want them to think about it. And as a product owner, you really want them to think about that one, because it's not so much on you at this point to define the actual delta between what they're trying to move, what needle they're trying to move, and what KPIs they have listed there that supports it. But for us on our side, once we get that handoff, that's going to be important to us, because all of our reporting, all of our metrics, if we're writing to this other table or to this other system or to this output document or whatever it is, or if we're trying to go out and do some kind of, pilot first, flip the switch, wait, get the feedback, solicited feedback, and then measure it, that's where we're really going to be able to measure it ourselves. And so I'm not saying that I'm discrediting their document. I'm saying I want them to support what's in the document. Does that make sense to everybody? I hope you're kind of getting my point here. I'm not being rude about it or ugly about it. I'm just saying we as product owners in a lean development environment, in that culture, we need to be making sure that we are pushing for measuring things the right way. We've got to measure the right stuff. And, oftentimes, again, generationally, we pass down in the traditional world these metrics, these KPIs, and we believe that it's going to do this and we believe it's going to do that, and these are the numbers. And some guys, I've even seen it in some of these things where they're giving me a KPI that's not even a real KPI for that organization. I've seen that before. I've seen that for years. So again, not saying I'm trying to discredit what they have written, what they're asking for, or their hypothesis, so to speak. I just want to make sure that it's supported. Okay. So when you're in this kickoff, all right, when you're in this kickoff meeting, these are the questions you want to push for is, I would like to know what your definition of success is. Push for those words, those directional verbs that we talk about: increase, decrease, reduce, improve. Go on about that. And you really want to let them think on it. It's not really, again, up to you to define the actual delta between what they have on the document or in the document or what they're trying to communicate. Just let them figure it out, that they have to have some kind of directional verb in there by X% by Y time or by some completion date or whatever. And they're asking you to do that work, right? So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're hitting on that right up front in your first set of Sharecare time sessions that you get with the one-on-one with that primary point of contact or sponsor, okay? Now, if you go ahead like in that kickoff session, and if they can't really spit out to you what it is that they're trying to measure or move, what needle they're trying to move this, then go ahead and try to set up a tentative time to follow up very soon following that time together. And look, if you do that, trust me, the meeting organizer or the senior project manager or whoever it is, they're going to love you for that because you're being proactive, all right? So I hope that kind of gives you an idea. Now I think we're down to how And I have a method on this that I want to share with you today. The method called 3 seats down. And I'm going to talk to you about going 3 seats down today to really understand what it is that they're asking for and what kinds of the issues that we're going to run into. So stick around for the next segment and we'll get 3 seats down. Three seats down. This is what I know you are shaking your head because I'm so simple. I'm simple-minded, I guess. Let me help you with this term and kind of this approach that has worked for me for many, many, many years. You have probably been in the kickoff meeting or this initial, document review or whatever it is for overview of this project or this initiative that you're going to start. You're probably into that session with someone probably in the first seat. Maybe they're in seat 1. It could be that you're in there with seat 2, but I'm not real sure. So let me tell you what I mean by that. So seat 1 that's the director or the executive level or the senior manager or whatever. They got the money, they got the problem. They just need folks around them to solve the problem. A lot of times this original story starts with them on their desires and what it is that their outcomes are that they're trying to push for. So that's who you find in seat 1. So you know who these people are. They're in the first seat. So that first seat, team member or associate or, leader in the organization or whatever, they're probably going to be in that kickoff because they have an interest in it, especially if it's the first time to go. Now, as they kind of migrate off or they've got other things going on, obviously, that they need to do. Because remember, they got money, and if you got money, you got problems. Just remember that. If you got money, you got problems, and you need to solve it. And, and the thing is that we are in a position to solve those problems for the folks who have the money. And that's what we've got to keep in mind, okay? They got the money, but they got the problems. We're the problem solvers for them, okay? So the original story starts with seat 1. It starts with them. Perhaps you've got second seat there. Now, the second seat is probably like a team manager. Not sure what the term would be for your organization, but maybe I'm just guessing, just to add a little bit of color, right? They want to add a little bit of color there to the day-to-day. They're going to give you firsthand perspectives. And so it's been my experience that the seat 2 player in this, so you got the seat 1 player, we already know who that is, seat 2 player. In my experience, these are folks that are in the seats. They kind of know what seat 1 player is talking about, but they really kind of have a hard time separating what their boss is asking for as it relates to the why, because they're not so much involved in the why. I don't know what it is. I hadn't really put my finger on the disconnect, but it seems to kind of break down right there to me most of the time at seat 2. Maybe it's because this team member is focused more on the reporting or the day-to-day or the operation or whatever. Maybe it's just because they're so focused on that they can't tell exactly where we're going organizationally or how this solution is going to help, or they don't seem to understand why this is such a problem. Maybe they've given up hope. Again, I can't put my finger on it, but I do know that this is the level that you want to talk with when it comes to the regulatory stuff or the reporting requirements. But you don't want to talk to them about the day-to-day if you're solving a day-to-day operational business problem. And I'm going to tell you why in just a second here. So what you want to do is you want to get the names of the people who are likely not in that meeting, the ones who are actually doing the work every day. Those are the folks that are 3 seats down. So you get to the third seat, right? They will tell you what their problems are. In fact, you will become their therapist if you're not careful, okay? And you got to be real careful not to be the therapist, all right, product owner. But I'm telling you, these folks that sit 3 seats down, they're going to tell you because they're the ones that's been telling the story, or it's fallen on deaf ears in the past. They're the ones who really want to solve it because it's the one that it's breaking on them every day, right? So I can say this with full confidence, basically, just to tell you, because first, if it weren't broken, we wouldn't be asked to fix it, right? Second, the folks doing it every day, they know it's broken more than anybody. Now, you do have to figure out which one of these folks who sits in the three seats, or in the third seat, rather, you have to figure out which one is the most reasonable, though, all right? Because some of these folks, I mean, it's just like anything else. You know, you're going to have your drama king, drama queen. You're going to have folks scattered all over the spectrum there as it relates to their level of emotional distress about how broken this stuff is, okay? They're going to give you their opinions, and it's going to get all inflated and everything. You want to work with the most reasonable third seat resource available, okay? Some of these folks are, they're going to be the ones who are just passionate enough to give an opinion, but they're still kind of shy enough to not say anything out loud in a large group. You don't want somebody who's lambasting the whole group, right? If you're in a small group or a large group. I call them the tweens. I want to find these tweens. They're the ones that are going to be your biggest helpers in understanding what works and what doesn't work and what can be adopted. And by the way, when I talk about adopted, I mean, you want to work with them through demos and ideas and brainstorming along the way, and that I bring them into my kind of side session, so to speak, so that I'm getting ready to define whatever it is that's going into my product backlog. I bring these third seat tweens in all the time, and I use them as resources for me to help me understand what their business process is, or what their disconnect is, what their gaps are, what their frustrations are. Because if I can solve some of those problems as well, it may end up that some of those problems were actually somewhere along the stem, or at least the root, the root, or at least the stem of some of the bigger operational problems that we're finding. And so the idea, though, is that if you go back to seat 2, you're not going to get the answers that you want. And you got to think about it in terms of organizationally speaking, right? Seat 2 reports to seat 1, but seat 3 typically reports to seat 2. Seat 2 wants to do a good job, but also wants to defend her people. Seat 3 just wants to do his job, and he wants somebody to listen to him. Seat 1 has money, and when you have money, you have problems. They just want solutions. They're not going to go in there and tell you every nickel and dime story that you care to have with them. That's what your one-on-one weekly sessions are for, to make sure that you're staying lockstep with what their needs are and that it's solving those problems, right? Because you're going to find the nuggets when you get to seat 3. And the folks who are sitting in seat 3, when you start building some trust with them and some faith with them and saying, hey, look, I want to help you solve some of these problems, but you have to tell me, like I'm 3 years old, where we're going wrong, right? I mean, put it on, just get on the level with them, man. Realize who you're talking with here. You're talking about somebody who's been griping about something or has recognized that there's a problem for so many years or so many months or so many weeks or whatever, okay? They're so happy that you're there, they're going to give you everything you need if you give them a win. And guess what? You build relationships along the way, which makes it even better. So, finally, I would say, too, remember, out of all these things, there's going to be some task items to follow up with. We call them action items. I mean, I know that a lot of organizations have gotten rid of the idea of action items, but I don't care what their action items are or lack thereof. You have an action item, product owner, out of this kickoff and out of defining all of these players. You've got to identify these players for sure, and hopefully you can get that out of that kickoff meeting. And you got to set up your one-on-one. But here's your big action item as a result of this kickoff meeting. You need to get a skeleton plan together on how you're going to solve the need. But you're not going to know that until you write a pretty good problem statement, okay, or an opportunity statement. So that's the goal. I mean, the goal, you got to define the goal and then put your skeleton plan together on how you're going to solve it. These other resources, particularly that one who's sitting in seat 3, they're going to help you identify a little bit more of some of the supporting issues that they have in order to help you reach your goal. Okay? Because remember what I've said, don't burn down the house to kill a cockroach. You want to solve it, but you don't want to create more problems for them along the way. And they're going to be the ones closest to it. They're the ones closest to the work. They're the ones closest to the effort. They're the ones closest to the problems. So they're probably going to give you a better idea of what the real day-to-day problems are, as opposed to just taking the word for it out of the big document that you've gotten handed off. And what issues you're hearing maybe from seat 1, who may be just being told what they want to hear, and from seat 2, who is defending their role, their team role, and maybe possibly even managing up to seat 1, right? So I hope that helps. The questions that you follow up on are going to be pretty important. So you just kind of get your arms around a plan out of that kickoff after you find out what they're really trying to do, and get that system to behave in a way that dictates better behavior, because that's really what you're after when you're working on some of these operational things. Okay, so we're going to land the plane and get off of this thing. But first, I just want to tell you again, I appreciate your patience and waiting on me for getting another episode out here off cadence. I'm terribly sorry. I'm going to do a better job of that going forward. So we should be back on regular cadence starting next week. So I look forward to your feedback. Thanks again for listening in and visiting Planet Product Owner.